Well, look at the green light is already on. Guess we're ready to go in the back room, apparently, Jennifer. Huh? I stop my mental wanderings here and we'll get going. Too much to think about here these days. Okay, here we go. Well, good morning, everybody. It is Thursday, January 15th, 2026, and it is 7:30 in the morning. And this is the meeting of the Edina Housing and Redevelopment Authority. And we've got some interesting topics ahead of us today. We're doing these meetings both live and online, and so there may be some people watching online. And if anybody wants to call in to talk to the HRA or discuss with the HRA a concern of theirs that they want to address in community comment, they can certainly do that. We don't have any public hearing activity this morning, so public comment would be your only opportunity to talk to the HRA. And if it's a topic that's on the agenda or scheduled for a future public hearing, those are topics that you cannot cover in any comments that you wish to make to the HRA, whether you're in person or online. So having provided that information to everybody, let me call the meeting to order and ask our Executive Director, also our City Manager, Scott Neal, to call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Risser.
Here.
Commissioner Jackson.
Here.
Commissioner Pierce.
Here.
Commissioner Agnew.
Here.
Chair Hovland.
Here. Next is the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good way to start any day. We've got a meeting agenda that's been published both for our benefit and the benefit of our residents. Is there anyone who wishes to modify the form of meeting agenda, the proposed form of meeting agenda? Hearing nothing, is there a motion to adopt the meeting agenda as published?
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Jackson moves. Commissioner Pierce seconds the adoption of the meeting agenda for the meeting of the HRA this January 15th, 2026. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the meeting agenda say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Meeting agenda is adopted. We've got something to work from this morning. And now we are at community comment. We're going to put that phone number back up on the screen, all that dial-in information, so people can have that. And I'm looking out in the audience, and I see our public finance advisor. I see one of our interns and our intern, and then Manager Neundorf. I don't see anybody in the audience who wishes to address the HRA. Do we have anybody online, Director Bennerhut?
I don't have anyone online yet, but because there is a brief delay in the broadcast, I would recommend we wait a minute before moving on. My clock shows that it's 7:34. I'll come back to you at 7:35 or when I have a caller, whichever's first.
Thank you.
It is now 7:35 and I still don't have a caller, so I think it's safe for you to move forward with the agenda.
All right. It doesn't look like our Executive Director has any comments to make relative to the prior meeting. It's not on the agenda. I assume that means that no one commented. That requires your response. Next is the consent agenda. There are half a dozen items on the consent agenda this morning. Is there anyone on the HRA that wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda? And these are the beginning of the year kinds of things that we do, official newspaper, official depositories, things like that. Hearing nothing, is there a motion to adopt the items on the consent agenda in a single motion?
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Jackson moves, Commissioner Pierce seconds the adoption of the items on the consent agenda in a single motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of those items on the consent agenda in a single motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. And those items are all approved. Items 6.1 through 6.6. And then we will turn to reports and recommendations, which is the heart of our meeting this morning. And this is not looking forward, but looking backward, I guess, and things that we accomplished in 2025. And we have our Economic Development Manager here with us this morning, Bill Neuendorf, and Stephanie Hawkinson, our Affordable Housing Manager. And we'll lead it off, I think, with 7.1, and that is the HRA Year in Review. Good morning.
Each year helps the HRA function. Thank you. Each year, city staff puts together a year in review document to summarize the actions of the HRA in the prior year. Actions and accomplishments, and also things that are still in progress. We started doing this several years ago in order to be more transparent and upfront about our successes, about our projects, and things that we expect to work on. This document, it's grown over the years. This year we're at 52 pages. So there's summaries of projects you'll recognize as you drive or walk through the community. We also include several exhibits and appendices to summarize and document the financing that makes these projects work. As you're aware, the HRA uses tax increment financing from time to time to help achieve the goals. And in order to be most transparent and upfront with how we use those dollars, I summarize a variety of different reports, financial reports, state reports, local reports, and glean out those relevant information about the financing of these projects and put that in the appendix. So the information in there is not new information. It's information that's been out and published in a wide variety of places. But in order to be most transparent and upfront with the community, we feel it best to put it in one place. So this morning, I'll run through a summary of that 52-page document. It'll just be a summary. And then, so as the chair mentioned, this is kind of looking backwards. Our second item is looking forwards. So we're going to do both this morning. Just a reminder as we get started, the HRA was established in Edina in 1974. It's been around for several years, working on projects throughout the community. It operates in order to pursue a set of objectives that were defined in 1977. At the time, I would argue these objectives were groundbreaking. We were looking to promote redevelopment, employment, to increase the long-term tax value of this community, working on multimodal transportation, working on bicycle, pedestrian pathways, better connections between neighborhoods. The other objectives, haven't had enough coffee this morning, was to focus on mixed-use sites, to separate that older style of zoning and land use where individual uses are segregated and separated, but to merge those uses together, to actually work, live, and play in the same general space. Of course, the HRA also gets involved in streets, roads, bridges, sidewalks, and pedestrian crossings. Affordable housing is a key goal as well. Owner-occupied, rental, families, senior citizens, the whole group of folks to make sure that there's affordable opportunities to live in Edina. So these goals and objectives were established in 1977. And as I look at these, they still hold true today. If you look at the best practice of planning and community development, these are still the best practices. They're very broad and general in their descriptions, which allows us to continue to use them as time evolves and as the community evolves. But I did just want to remind us of those. We don't talk about those goals very often, but they're embedded in everything the HRA does. They're also aligned with the comprehensive plan that guides the city council. So that's how those two documents flow together. This year, Stephanie Hawkinson and I put together a list of accomplishments. While it's a long list, it's not a very visible list. This has been a slow year for construction. Despite that, we've had another remarkable year in Edina. So in no particular order, we're happy to see that the Finch Apartments on 77th Street were finished. The HRA helped provide some financing for that and bridge a gap that would have prevented that project from moving forward. And along with that, we delivered a public road that was incorporated into that project. We also made a decision, you made a decision, to use some existing assets, some funds in the Centennial Lakes District, and use that to support the debt issue for the new bridge on Vernon Avenue and 50th Street. That was in order to reduce the debt that was issued. We had some cash available. Part of the HRA objective is to build road, bridges, et cetera, that connect our neighborhoods. So that was certainly an eligible use. We also saw some good progress on 72nd and France with the Craftsman office building breaking ground earlier this year. When I drove by the other day, they're just starting to get to level 5. That building is going to be topping out soon. They're aiming to have that substantially complete towards the end of 2026. And next to that is the apartment building called The Setting. That is also above ground now. The wood panel should be start to appear on site in the next several weeks. But those are two major accomplishments just to get those started in a financing environment that it's been headwinds for several years. So if you drive through the metro area, there's still some construction. There's not a whole lot. So to have both of those projects kicking off this past year was remarkable. We wanted to make sure that we recognize that. We also worked with the state legislation, and were successful in securing legislation to possibly consider extension of 2 existing TIF districts. That's not a tangible accomplishment yet, but it provides options and flexibility to the HRA and to the City Council. And that's also part of staff's goal, is to make sure that we provide as many options as possible to achieve these goals that we're pursuing. This year, we also talked quite a bit about our SPARK program. That was a program that it's a one-time program embodied by state law. This year, we decided to recognize the modification in state law and give that program one more year. So that program will expire not at the end of last year, but at the end of this year. And with those funds, we also have supported a handful of projects. We modified a loan agreement with the Chamber of Commerce. If you recall, we issued a construction loan to them that will be repaid. We did recognize some of the financial challenges that they're encountering, and we modified that loan agreement. But they are on pace, and it is up to date in their payment schedule. So those funds will be coming back to us, back into the program. We also approved 3 new loans and grants for small businesses. And so each of those, now that it's here in the new year, they are under construction and they're moving forward. So that's why we use SPARK to address a hardship in the financing to get these business investments to happen. From a development perspective, the HRA has owned that vacant land, the old public works site in Grandview. We've owned it for about a dozen years. And this past year, we interviewed a number of prospective developers and buyers, made a recommendation and selected one that we're currently negotiating with. And then the HRA chose to transfer that land to the city so that when it is sold, the funds that are raised will not go into the HRA budget, but they'll go into the City Council budget, which allows the City Council much more flexibility in how to use those funds. Now, we're still a year, or possibly 2, probably 2027 until we actually close on that. But again, we're positioning that site to be redeveloped, sold, and become another productive part of the community. And then in the affordable housing realm, a lot of smaller projects. Again, this year there's not a big new building for the affordable world, but it's keeping what we have. Naturally occurring affordable housing is highly coveted in the marketplace. Buyers like to buy it and convert it to luxury or market rate. And the HRA participated in loans to a couple projects to keep them affordable in the long term while they're being rehabbed. We also created that HERO Second Mortgage Program, similar to the Come Home to Edina program in a way, but revived with a new focus and some new proceeds there. Also happy to announce that we closed on that first mortgage at the end of the year. So it's always hard to close on real estate deals at the during the holiday season, but the first one was closed, and so that program is up and running and being successful. I had mentioned the Come Home to Edina program. 4 homeowners were provided assistance on that program before the funds ran out. So that program is currently paused and on hiatus due to lack of funding, but earlier in the year they were able to help 4 families become homeowners. And as you recall, we also talked about affordable housing a lot. Policy and financing is difficult. We've all recognized that. And with Stephanie Hawkinson's leadership, we held 3 different work sessions to discuss ways of moving forward and accomplishing that goal more effectively. So that's quite it for a slow year. I think that's quite a bit. I'll run through some of the current construction projects in our second section here, just as a reminder of where we are. I'm not going to go into any of these in any particular detail. That's not really our goal here, but just to recognize that there are a number of things happening with participation of the HRA in different forms. So the first project is the Arcadia office building, just west of Highway 100 here. Now that's part of the Grandview district. That site's been talked about for dozens, decades, for quite some time. That project is privately financed, so there was no financial participation in that. But the work of the HRA and a lot of the long-term planning that we've done certainly makes that area more desirable. As you recall, the HRA funded the roadway improvements in that area. So having updated roads, sidewalks, et cetera, is also part of what made the buyers interested, because they saw the infrastructure was modern and available. In the bottom illustration, that's the Finch Apartments. That's in our Pentagon Park TIF district, right next to the Fred Richards Park. 276 units, 10 of which are affordable. And that finished early in the summer, and occupancy is going very, very well. We do expect to issue a TIF note. We're still going through all the paperwork. Before the HRA actually pledges or actually issues a note or provides reimbursement, we go through their books and make sure they did what they said they were going to do, make sure their financial gap that they were expecting is actually what happened, to make sure that we don't provide any kind of excessive subsidy or something they don't need. So we're still in that review process, but we think we'll have that note issued this year in 2026. And on this project, we also used a Spark forgivable loan to fund that public road that was constructed. We had the developer build it to city specs and provide access to it, and we then reimbursed them. So they finished the road, delivered the road to our engineering department's satisfaction. So we have issued them those funds. It was $2 million for that road. So we use Spark rather than increasing the tax levy or issuing public debt for that. We just use the funds to get it built and get it delivered. And then jumping over to France Avenue, I had mentioned those 2 new buildings at 72nd and France. The Craftsman office is on the corner at Gallagher. That's the one that's further ahead in their progress. They got a little bit of a head start on compared to the housing. And then the apartment project is at 72nd, also under construction there. The HRA is participating in the financing of each of these. So related to the office, we'll keep in communication with the developer. We do expect to issue a TIF note to reimburse them for all their site work. And then they will deliver to us public easements to use all those things that we're reimbursing them for. And at the settings, we used, rather than additional TIF, we used Spark money instead. We felt that was a more appropriate, less risky approach to getting that particular deal done. So we provided over $4 million in reimbursement to them in order to convert the 10% of affordable units from a 20-year term to permanent. Part of the concern of staff is, as we've been doing these projects and having 10% of the units affordable, that's a limited term affordability, typically 20 years. And so our concern has been, what happens in year 21? We potentially lose everything we've worked for. And so we negotiated with the developer to make those units permanent in this building. They've been living up to their end of the deal, and we have reimbursed them for some of their construction costs so far. We issued that as a forgivable loan, which means they still have to finish the project and wrap everything up in the fashion that they said they would before we give them any consideration of actually forgiving that loan. So it's a way to protect the HRA's interest and the community's interest. But we're very, very excited to see those two projects moving, especially in a climate where there's not a lot of construction happening right now. And then we have two other active projects. These have been subject of a lot of conversation over the years. The old Macy's Furniture site is under contract to Enclave Development. The HRA has pledged to create a TIF district and use TIF on that site. They continue to pursue financing for that project. They're a little bit behind where they thought they were going to be. So they're still working hard to get that site fully financed and start construction. So that's part of the risk of real estate development. They've been working on this since 2023. They've been spending money, a lot of money, entitlements, architects, marketing, the whole thing, for years. And while the HRA has pledged TIF, we don't provide them a single dollar until they actually deliver something. So this one is still on the books. We hope to see some action, hopefully some fast action here in 2026. But as I mentioned, the challenge of financing some of these bigger projects, it's really, really challenging. And one of the common factors that we're noticing is if it's a single building, you can get those financed a little bit more easily. But when it's a multiple phase building or multiple phase site, it's so much more challenging. Because in order to get the first phase built, you have to build the roads for everything. And that's where the financing doesn't really work out. So that's another situation and reason why the HRA steps in, to allow the infrastructure to be built. So that's the Enclave site. The other one is at 70th in France, owned by Mortensen and Orion. This is the former U.S. Bank site. Similar story there. They've been working on this since 2022. Real estate development is not easy. But it's the same exact story. While the developer has invested a great deal of money, time, and effort to get this project financed, that has not happened yet. We're continuing to have discussions with them about how to get things revived. There's no easy solution. If there were, it would have been built already. But do expect some conversation on that site this year. Last year we talked to them about different ways to get the parking structure financed. In the report that I prepared, we never actually ended up speaking about it, but in the report that I issued that was in your packet, I had some serious reservations about that particular strategy. So as we've continued in dialogue with the developer, we'll see if there's a way to work together without putting us at risk, without putting the HRA at financial risk. I've not sensed any appetite to do that, and so we'll see if there's a better way to get something happening there. So we're not giving up on these, but they're not accomplished yet. And then here's a couple projects where the HRA was not involved directly, but they're still on our radar. Major expansion at the Galleria, incredible revitalization at Southdale Mall, and then the Southdale Office Center just on the west side of France is seeing some renovation. So these are projects that are years in the making. They, in a big way, they go back to 2012 when the HRA created that first TIF district to encourage Simon to have Southdale back on their radar and make that a major investment center for them. So this is now phase 3 of their investment on the property. fully privately financed, so no HRA interaction. But I still believe had we not gotten involved back in 2012, that mall would be dead. So a lot of new businesses there, over 50 new businesses at Southdale. Galleria is doing a lot of re-tenanting as well. Some solid anchors are moving and expanding, others are shifting and growing. So if you're a shopper, you'll notice a lot of change in those centers. But from an HRA perspective, those owners are reinvesting in their properties to make them relevant and competitive, and that's our goal. The year in review document also contains summaries of the programs that we promote here under the HRA banner. Not going to go through these in any particular detail. I think that'd be redundant. But let me just say that many of these are provided by the city or by the HRA. Some of them are provided by partners. For example, Elevate Hennepin is a business advising program run by Hennepin County. The city and the HRA had thought about doing something similar here on our own. It's just not cost effective. And so we partner with the county to promote and provide that service and that program here for Edina businesses and Edina residents. We are, for the second year, having some of the programming happen in Edina at the offices of the Chamber of Commerce. I had mentioned that we issued a loan to them to help build out their new space for business advising. And while that organization is not providing the training themselves, we've partnered with Hennepin to still put that site to good use. And then I'll spend a few minutes talking about TIF, tax increment financing. There's a lot of it, always a lot of confusion, and I take the easy way out and say it's complicated. It is complicated, but I'm not going to go through it in finite detail. But these are highlights. There's more detail in the report. But these are maps and graphs that you've seen on a regular basis. The map shows where TIF districts are located in Edina. And then the bar graph shows that compared to our peers and neighbors, Edina uses tax increment financing on a much less frequent basis and to a much lower degree than most of our neighbors and peers. We use TIF strategically. We use it intentionally, and we use it to accomplish community goals. The report also summarizes all of the projects where the HRA has participated financially. Usually we do that by means of a TIF note, which is a pledge, a giant IOU, so to speak. Once the project achieves certain milestones, that note begins to accrue interest and becomes payable. And then payments are made twice a year. Ms. Hawkinson and I review the payment requests, and then it works through our finance department to actually get the checks issued. So right now there's 7 projects that are completed or substantially completed and have earned payments towards their TIF notes. So those are summarized here. And then the report also has a summary of the Spark program. Since that's a newer time-limited program, I decided to break that out separately, just like I've done the last couple years. So I mentioned the new roadway at the Finch, the setting apartment, that's under construction. The new basement bar at 50th and France, there was a Spark grant for that that's still pending. So that business is now open. That's exciting. It's called Noma Hi-Fi Lounge. Was just there last night, actually. And while the project is complete, I'm still going through the paperwork. So we haven't issued them any funds yet. I still need to look at their receipts and invoices and those types of things. But the big shiny thing that we helped them with was an elevator, a lift. And that allows that basement area to actually become usable. So as that business evolves, we'll see that property have a more prominent position on the tax roll. Before it was just kind of a basement for boxes and dust. Now it'll be an occupiable business and one that everyone should check out. And then the 3 other projects I mentioned, the Americana restaurant, Coder's Clubhouse, and JJ's Poke and Noodles, 3 new restaurants that are under construction, or 2 new restaurants and then a business for youth training. Those are under construction. Look for those to open later this year. The document also includes a matrix of the public benefits that we deliver with TIF. This chart, I'm not going to go through it. Happy to answer questions, but when we use TIF in Edina, we use TIF to a different standard than is allowed in state law. So state law allows communities to use TIFs for a number of different reasons. We use TIF to accomplish public goals. It's not just a handout to a developer. And so those public goals are embodied in our comprehensive plan, and those initial 10 goals that I mentioned earlier in the meeting this morning. Public space, public roads, affordable housing, tax-based growth, employment. And so what I've done is keep track of each of the active TIF districts and how we're doing on delivering those public improvements. The green boxes are projects that are substantially finished and have delivered those outcomes. The yellow boxes are some of the projects that I mentioned earlier that are pending, 70th in France, the old Macy's site. Right now, they haven't delivered anything yet until they actually get started, so there's no outcome. Those are pending, but we expect those to be delivered. And then the boxes that are gray that say not applicable, or NA, not every project is expected to achieve every possible goal under the sun. And so public roadways are not an expectation of every single project. Affordable housing is not an expectation of every project. So that's why I say NA for that feature. The report also goes into detail about the tax-based growth. I've split it into two different segments: redevelopment areas and affordable housing. So again, one of the 10 goals of the HRA is to grow the long-term tax value of our community. That helps the city, helps the schools, helps the county, helps the taxpayer. So this is a long game. It's not a short-term accomplishment. It takes decades to get there. But what we did was summarize the original tax capacity when we created a TIF district versus the current tax capacity. And I'll just use the top two as examples. At 44th in France, the HRA provided funding for the Lorient, the apartment building with the retail on the first floor. When we started, that property had a tax capacity, which is the figure used by the assessing department and all the tax people in the state, 29,000. So kind of a random number, but 29,000. After that site was redeveloped and transformed, it increased 10 times to 300,000. That's the type of investment that we try to pursue with the HRA. We don't just want a 10% growth. We don't want a doubling, frankly. It needs to be transformational. We we accomplished the same thing at 50th in France. Prior to the construction of Nolan Mains and that new parking garage, the tax capacity of that corner, and these are just like the acre and a half site, not the whole business district, but the original number was 57,000. When Nolan Mains was finished, it exploded to almost 1 million. That's the kind of transformational things we're pursuing for this community. So I thought it'd be good to document that and show that success. On affordable housing projects, the numbers are similar, but not as aggressive. With affordable housing project, the goal there isn't to just grow the tax base and that type of thing. It's to provide housing for people, families, households, seniors, whatever the makeup of the residents are. So we do find that when you build new construction, you always have some growth to the tax base, but it's not going to be as explosive as you find in redevelopment districts. And that's part of the balance, right? Not every project can accomplish every possible goal. And then I thought I'd wrap up just using one project as an example. There's always confusion about TIF dollars and is it worth it and is it a waste or is it a handout? Who's getting hurt? Who's getting helped? So I use one example. It's right across the street from City Hall, the old Perkins. And yes, I still do miss my pancakes at Perkins. But that was transformed into the Maison Green Apartments and the Starling Restaurant. What we started doing several years ago was tracking the tax-based value of TIF projects. It's something, typically a TIF district is 25 years. A lot of employees change time over that, and no one really pays attention. So we started paying attention when I started working here. So that site, when it was Perkins, the property value was $3 million. It was flat and stagnant for many years. Through entitlement and having a new owner and having a new vision, when the new buyer bought the site and changed it from a mostly vacant commercial building to a site that was going to be apartments, the value more than doubled to just under $7 million. When they finished the building, it exploded times 10 to $70 million. So from $3 million valuation to $70 million. If you're the accountant paying the taxes, that's the second line from the bottom. For many years, the taxes that site generated for the city, the school, the county, the state, was about $100,000, and that number had been flat and stagnant for several years. Now, I'm glad they paid their taxes. That's very helpful to the whole effort. But when the HRA gets involved, we want to see that tax investment grow. And so in the first yellow column, after they bought the property and had it rezoned for housing, their tax bill doubled to $200,000. When they finish the project, their tax bill is currently $1.1 million. So we went from several years of stagnation at $100,000 to increase by a factor of 10. So their current tax bill is just under $1.1 million. And that gets distributed to the city, the schools, the state, the county, and the TIF district to partially reimburse the developer for their expenditures and their investments, and then to partially reimburse the city for our investment into building the new roads, the new sidewalks, and all that in the area. The very last line, I did break out the taxes that are paid to the school district. That's often a commonly asked question. Doesn't TIF hurt the schools? How are they going to get their funding for the teachers? So it's a similar story there. For several years, the school district recognized about $19,000 in tax revenue from the site. Again, flat and stagnant, but $19,000. When they transform that from a mostly vacant commercial to a residential site, that tax bill more than doubled to $40,000. And when they built the building, the taxes that are now paid to the school district jumped from $19,000 to $155,000. So that's why some people say that, TIF hurts schools. The school is getting far more revenue from the site, even one that's currently in a TIF district, than they ever did. And so that's a unique provision in Minnesota state law. The TIF laws have evolved for over 50 years. And at some point in that period, I don't know exactly when, they made some changes to make sure that the schools were able to receive more revenue during the TIF district. And then when the TIF district is over, all the obligations are paid for, the roads paid for, the developer's note is finished. That full value, currently over $1 million, that will then go into the kitty, so to speak, for the city, the school, and the county, and everybody else. So I just wanted to end with that one example. I think it's a very relevant example. It's recent. You can walk outside and look at it. You can drive on the new roads and walk on the new sidewalks. And these are some of the numbers behind it that made it possible. So that's where I'll wrap it up. But the full document will be posted on the city website. As we consider an update to that document for next year, if there's additional information you find helpful, let me know. We can certainly consider that for next year's report. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back to you.
Good. Any questions or comments for Manager Newendorf? Yes, Commissioner.
So thank you very much for this overview. I think this is really helpful, and I appreciate the transparency that it provides. I've got a couple of questions. One on slide 7, when we're talking about the Arcadia and the Finch. So with the Arcadia, that is in the Grandview TIF area. Can you tell us how the taxes, where the tax dollars for this site, even though we didn't grant a TIF note to them, it's in a TIF district. Can you tell us how the tax dollars are going to be distributed?
Yeah, sure. So this site we excluded from the TIF district. So this, we considered including it. I think we drew those boundaries in 2013 or 2014. We considered it, but at that time it wasn't ready. And the owner had no interest in selling it at that point. So we intentionally excluded it from a TIF district. When this site started to go through the redevelopment process, the developers did reach out and ask to see if they could use TIF to help finance it. We had a very brief discussion because it became apparent that they could privately finance it. Why would we get involved if a bank's going to do it? So right now, when that project, today, and when it's finished, that site is fully taxable. As you recall, commercial buildings are subject to fiscal disparities. So 40% of the taxes from a commercial building leave Edina and go to the fiscal disparities pool. That's part of the Minnesota state law from the early 70s, late 60s. But there's no TIF on this in any form.
Okay, terrific, thank you. And then at the Finch, part of that is a public road, and refresh my memory, isn't that the road that's going to be the new entrance to the Fred Richards Park?
That's correct. Yeah. So that road will be built in two phases. The portion on the developer's original land is finished, but right now that road dead ends at the Fred Richards Park. So as the city does our park improvements, we will connect to that existing road that's now finished. But yes, that roadway, it is the main entrance to the park. It's also the entrance to the Finch parking garage and the adjacent parking lot for the office building. So it serves multiple purposes, but that is its purpose.
And so when the Fred Richards Park is redeveloped, the sign will be big and the public will have that access. Because right now it's really hard to get in there. If you don't know where it is, you wander around a lot. But it'll be a new entrance right on 77th with a big City of Edina Park sign, correct?
It'll definitely be a big entrance. I'm not the signage person.
Okay.
Yeah, but
all right.
Yeah, as a city council and as engineering staff, we'll make sure that there's a sign that gets people to where they're going.
So, the City Council and the Planning Commission are going to be working on a new comprehensive plan. And part of that will be looking at the Southdale guidelines and the Southdale plan. With these two projects at the former Macy site and then at 70th and France, this issue of financing is a complication, I think, that was not envisioned when the Southdale plan was written. Do you think that I'd like to charge you with connecting the planning discussion about the Southdale plan with some sort of financing experts or resources, because I think that was not envisioned, how difficult it would be to actually do these public improvements. Now that we've got a couple experiences under our belt, they're not built, but we have some real life experience. I personally would like to see our HRA experience folded into the planning experience when we're reviewing the comprehensive plan. So that's just an idea to put it out there.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. I'll certainly be involved when the comprehensive plan is updated.
Great, thank you. And then this is actually a question for Manager Hawkinson about the HEROES program and Come Home to Edina. There's been some questions about who is eligible for these second mortgages. Could you tell us a little bit about what the eligibility is for a HEROES program loan and how we determined that?
So background, the Come Home to Edina was here, and they could work wherever they just want to get out of their home. With the HEROES program, you have to work within the city limits. So that is a narrowing down from the Come Home to Edina, that you can't work in Richfield or Bloomington or Minneapolis or anywhere else. You have to, so they have to prove, part of the application process is their proof of employment
and where they are employed, where they are physically located for work, and it has to be within the city boundaries.
Okay, thank you.
And then it's with the education system, health system, or public employee.
Okay, great, thank you. And can you tell us a little bit more about the income eligibility?
I don't have the parameters right now. It is guided and controlled by the funding source. So it's around $103,000 for a household. And we do look at their tax returns, pay stubs. We look at investment and asset income. We get the application package is fairly robust. And we do check for income caps.
And this is part of the income, or we look at area median income, and this is, I think, like 110% of area median income or something. But it's to it does have an affordability aspect to it. We're not giving these out to wealthy people. It's looking at the value of homes in our city, and it's tied. Anchored by our area median income at some level, isn't it?
It is tied by TIF statute and what the incomes are allowed by TIF statute. That is not necessarily tied to the local area median income. But the limiting factor is income, and the statute does not limit the cost of the home. The income of a homeowner naturally limits the cost of the home.
Okay. But it is tied to affordability and helping people to live in our town who otherwise wouldn't be able to.
Exactly. That is exactly it. And so the loan allows for folks to leverage more home that reflects the costs of homes in Edina.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, comments at this point in time? Member Risser? Commissioner Risser?
Thank you. I would like to build on what Commissioner Jackson just said, and actually I brought in this page that is from the Southdale Design Guidelines, and I don't know if we could put that up there, but I too am really concerned about some of the elements that are in our comprehensive plan that may be stymieing development instead of making it flow more economically. And when I look at this, and I have been staring at this for quite a while, the area that is circled represents the site of the new Hennepin County Library. And if you go back and you listen to the Planning Commission when they're reviewing that site plan, it generally is a kind of negative conversation about the library proposal. And it is really influenced heavily by these guidelines. And the takeaway was sort of, we'd rather see you split this site up into 4 and, put in housing. And I think looking at this, and I really did appreciate how Director Neuendorf started with 1977 and the goals and how they're still applicable and there's broad appeal. And I thought this vision to put a grid over the greater Southdale area, to me at least, is not necessarily aging particularly well. And when we look at what developers have proposed, and I have talked to people who were more engaged in the process. Admittedly, I was not going to those meetings when we were talking about this, but one of the questions that came up was, who's going to pay for the roads? And what I've learned is the idea was PUD will be used to rezone. The benefits that the developer gets through PUD will offset the costs of putting in that infrastructure, and everything will flow really well. And I've tried to find out more about financing roads. If it's a city road, a city project, you've got to have that money in your CIP, is my understanding. But I think as we look at development and we look at how people are really spending a lot of time, a lot of energy, and it's not working. And then also, this is from 2018, so some things have already happened. And Southdale's a diamond, not a square. And so the developments that have happened, Restoration Hardware, the Shake Shack, the hotel, all of those respond logically to what is there, what Victor Gruen created. And so it's not necessarily a logical pathway forward. And I really think we need to look at the plan and think about, possibly removing it, or at least having that debate when we talk about the new comprehensive plan. So thank you.
All right. Commissioner?
Well, yeah, just for the record, I don't oppose the Southdale plan. I don't want to be lumped together with that. I think it was a wonderful community effort that took 2.5 years to put together. I just think we can learn from our experience, and I want to just make that clear. Thank you.
Mr. Pierce?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I have a TIF question, and so if you could, I think you could probably use 9.1 to answer this question. I definitely align with the fact that we're using TIF and creating enormous tax capacity. But I do want to just clarify the way this slide, and I think 18 is the same way. We're showing, if you say 44th in France, the original tax capacity in 2019, and then the current tax capacity. The district is 20 or 25 years. And so when I read this, it kind of implies to me that additional capacity is usable in 6 years, if I'm doing the math. So can you just explain, and you kind of talked about this on slide 10, with some of that additional capacity is going to the schools before that TIF district has been decertified. That's kind of how I'm interpreting this, but I don't think that's the way you mean this, because the 50th in France would be the same way. You're showing 7 years later an enormous tax capacity increase from 2017. And I don't think that's what you're implying. So the bigger question is, if you could talk through the process of when that additional capacity actually flows back to the general fund or the other sources other than staying in the district. Does that make sense?
It does, yes. And you're right, that is not what I'm implying or what I'm intending. Yeah. So let me stick on this slide for a moment. So the connection, the correlation that you're making is not a correlation. I'll stick to the 44th in France example. So there's a couple goals here. One is grow the tax base. Long-term, grow the tax base. That's what we're trying to illustrate here. So we've accomplished that. At 44th in France, the tax base grew by a factor of 10x. Unless a tornado takes that building out next summer, that tax base growth is there. Different question is, what are the tax dollars, not the tax base, but the actual, how much is the check written for? The actual dollars, how much is that and where does it go? So let me jump to slide 10 for that one. This is a different project, but it's the same concept. So on this comparison, I simplified this to dollars I simplified this in a manner that I think more people can understand, because tax capacity is just one measure that the state auditor looks at and the state assessor or the county assessor looks at. But most of us as taxpayers, we don't get into the weeds of exactly how was my tax bill calculated. So I simplified it here. So if we use this as an example, this is the Eden Wilson, and if we go with the second line or from the bottom, for several years when it was still a Perkins, after they had relocated the regional office, they paid about $100,000 in taxes every year. The tax capacity was low, the tax base was low, the tax level, $100,000 is still a significant tax bill, but it was low. When they finished the building, now their tax bill is $1 million, $1.1 million. So right now, most of that, probably $700,000, stays within the district to pay for the developer note and to pay off the roads. In lieu of issuing city debt, with going back to the levy, we issued debt saying we're going to use the TIF to pay to build that road. So this particular district is a 25-year district. So working with Ellers, while state law gives us 25 years, we always try to get it paid for in less than that. I can't tell you exactly I can't predict the future to that degree, but let's say that it takes the full length, the full term, 25 years. That means that this growth in the taxes that are paid will be retained in that district for that full amount. And then in year 26, then that's when it goes to the full, back to all the government agencies, city, county, schools. So it is, while it's a big tax-based growth, that growth is not fully recognized until after the TIF district is decertified. At 44th in France, that was a 15-year district. When we did Southdale, that was an 8-year district. This particular one is a 25-year district. So as we go through the process of analyzing the financial needs, we always aim for the shortest period that's practical. This particular one, 25 years, was practical. The other one, 15 years was practical. So that it gets very confusing. So I hope that is responsive to your question.
Yeah, that's exactly my question. And it is, I think in totality, it's complicated, but you did a great job of explaining that. I don't think anybody can argue against the fact that the use of TIF exponentially increases the tax capacity, right? That's very clear. In every project, you can see that. My challenge is how can we, in the way that we structure those districts, so the strategy around it moving forward, how can we be, I guess I'll say creative in allowing that tax capacity to be utilized within the community sooner. And so I appreciate you saying I didn't know we had a district that was an 8-year. That's the first time I think that's the first time I've heard that. And so I think being creative and trying to figure out as we continue the use of this tool, how we can accelerate that beyond 20 or 25 years is great. So thank you for clarifying that.
Thanks. Other comments, questions? Yes, Commissioner Agnew.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I don't have any specific questions. I think my fellow commissioners asked some really great questions, but I appreciate all of the clarity that you bring to a lot of these projects. I think that these are all ones that I think are really important for our community, and so it's just great to have this annual summary that I know we do every year, but it's great to be reminded of the value that we're adding to the community. So thank you.
I would just reinforce the comments of my colleagues that I think we appreciate as a council when you come with a notion of using tax increment financing as a development tool, that it's for a public benefit, that it's judiciously used, and that when you look at your data, that it represents, I think, probably around 10% of our projects and 1.6% of our tax base. So I think all of those things are really important to all of us and important to our residents as well. And when you think about the good question that Commissioner Pierce raised, that analysis of the use of that increment compared to the organic growth or the otherwise remodeled property, whatever it might be, that improves that property, is it worth the wait? Is the patience, to have that patience to wait the length of the life of the TIF district to capture that significant increase in value? That's kind of the heart of the analysis, I think, for all of us. At least it is for me. So thanks for that update. Appreciate it. You keep going.
Sure thing. Well, let's jump to the next one. So the next item is looking forwards to 2026. So no big decisions required at all this morning, but as Stephanie Hawkinson and I were kind of plotting out the work plan for the year and figuring out when things fit and when is the best time or when is not a great time, we wanted to put some things on your radar just so we don't surprise you in the future. So this year, there's a number of projects and discussions that we're anticipating to help us achieve our goals better. So on the policy side, there's 3 things that are on our radar. If there's other things that you want to talk about, please let us know. If there's something that's a higher priority or a lower priority, let us know. We work to pursue the aims of the city as guided by you, so we're here to hear your direction. But from a policy level, we'd like to consider and have a discussion at least about the idea of possibly creating an economic development authority to supplement the work of the HRA. Those are 2 different types of legal entities embodied in state law. And when we conclude the meeting, I have Nick Anhut from Ellers here that is going to give us a quick informational about what's an EDA, what's an HRA, what's the difference, and is it helpful? Again, no big decisions at all, but that's something that we think we should have at least a conversation about. Last year, we started a conversation about the use of tax increment financing, our policy, how it's embodied, and we never actually finished that discussion. So we'd love to get that slotted into a conversation this year so we can finish the conversation. And then the multifamily affordable housing policy. This dates back to 2015. It's been updated a number of times, but it hasn't been updated for a few years. And as we look at the ongoing challenges to finance affordable housing, we wanted to have a discussion that starts here at the HRA, would get finished at a city council level. But since housing is embedded into the HRA, we wanted to start the conversation here. So those are 3 policy discussions that we will try to fit into the calendar over the next several months. If there's one that's more important or higher priority to you, please let us know. And then from a project perspective, as we look into the crystal ball, there's 7 projects or programs that we see becoming relevant this year. And these are in no particular order. But we talked about the corner at 70th and France. That site has sat since 2022. We're glad that the bank got relocated. That was the first step to allow anything to happen. So we're really glad that they're in a new, beautiful space. But we really need to re-engage the owners and get something happening there. They are soon going to be at a point where they need to decide, do they stick with the plan that that's been approved for several years, or do they crumple it up and start from scratch? They're not at that point yet, but they're getting to that point. And we want something developed. We want something good to happen there. So expect some conversation about that. We're going to monitor the progress at the other sites on France Avenue, the Craftsman and the Setting Apartments. Right now, those are under construction. We're going to just kind of sit back and let those finish. And then I'm in frequent conversation with the developers at Enclave about the old Macy's site. Right now, we're just waiting for them to get to the closing date to acquire the real estate. And so right now, we're just monitoring that one as well. The deal has already been done. But as far as the financial markets, I mean, things are still a whirlwind out there. So we'll keep our eye on that one and report back. Pentagon Village, we've made some good progress, but there's still 2 vacant sites at Pentagon Village. Lot 2, the old hotel, or what was supposed to be a hotel, that's still mired in a lawsuit. So until that lawsuit is resolved, I don't think much is going to happen there. And then Lot 5 was supposed to be the big corporate headquarters. Well, it's hard to build corporate headquarters these days. So we'll continue to promote development on that site and report back. The old public works site on Eden Avenue, the HRA to some degree will continue to get involved in that. Right now, the city council soon will talk about entering into a purchase agreement. So once that's on its path, that becomes more of a city council conversation. But still, as a HRA, we just transferred it. We've been working on it for a dozen years. We're still involved to some degree. We don't expect financing with this group of folks. We think they can get it done privately. And then another vacant site that we have tangible interest in is the other half of the site that we bought for the new fire station. The city bought an 8-acre site. The fire department needed about 3 to 4 acres. So the second half of that site was intended for redevelopment. We started some conversations in the past year. We hope to finish that conversation and get something to begin to happen. Right now the site's vacant. It's not hurting anybody, but it's not also helping anything either. And then with that Spark program, I am seeking new businesses that need assistance to get to their construction phase on that one. For the Spark program, I'm going to give it about 6 months. If we don't identify businesses that need the investment by June or July, I think we're going to wind down the program. So I'll report back on that one. And then Stephanie is working on a new program to promote energy efficiency in affordable housing. So, the rent, the mortgage is one thing, but you still have to pay the electric bill and the heat bill and the water bill. So she's working on a program to see if there's a way to bring some of those regular costs in line. So those are the 7 things that we're expecting to work on. In this business, there's probably another 4 things that we don't expect that are going to just come flying at us at some point this year. So thanks for your patience with some of those surprises. But, if we see progress on half of these, it will be a full year. So I just wanted to put them on your radar. And certainly if you have any questions or priorities or things we missed, happy to talk offline or anytime about that. But, Mr. Chair, that's all I have for this one.
Good. That prompted anything with respect to looking forward in 2026 comments? All right. I know we've got a limited amount of time remaining. We've got an important topic to discuss here.
All right,
Appreciate Mr. Anhut being here this morning.
Yeah, so for this one, I'll just do a really quick introduction. So we had a little bit of time this morning, so I thought we'd take advantage since we're all here. I mentioned the idea of an economic development authority to supplement the work of a redevelopment authority. One of the key things that, an HRA, as the name implies, focuses on housing and redevelopment. An economic development authority can do the same things and more. So one thing where an HRA is limited is business attraction and business retention. So as an economic development professional, vacant space is my worst enemy. We want full office buildings, full retail centers, open space, parks, that's all good, but vacant lots are what I want to get rid of. And when it comes to business attraction and retention, that's not really within the scope of an HRA. It's definitely within the scope of an EDA. So that's why we're even having the conversation. Again, we just wanted to introduce the subject this morning. I thought Nick Anhut would be the best person to give a brief introduction and show you some examples of how other cities do it. And the one thing that I've learned in the several years in this role is there's no singular correct way, and there's really no wrong way. As long as you follow one of the options that's embodied in state law, you're good. But there's some options to consider. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Anhut, and he'll run through the presentation.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Anhut, welcome.
Hey, happy 2026. Thank you for having me. Nick Anhut with Ehlers & Associates, financial advisor to the city and the HRA. Good to be before you this morning. Many of these topics you've already discussed kind of ad nauseum this morning, so I'm going to skip ahead. I don't know if we have any timing constraints that I need to be aware of, but please let me know if we need to hurry this along. So there are multiple forms of organization structures that are available to cities across the state to be able to provide financial incentives, financial tools to help develop and redevelop your community. As Bill mentioned, historically, the city of Edina has established an HRA and used its powers under the authority granted by statute, but there are other authorities that are available as well. So the topic today is on economic development authorities. There are also port authorities that have been established throughout the state. Those are specifically enacted by special legislation, so the legislature gave a specific city this one authority, one-time authority to create an entity like that. But there are numerous such entities, and they're embodied in the statute. There are also communities that don't use these tools, so just kind of be aware of the broad spectrum that are available under the state law. But typically, if a community is going to use what aligns with its primary focus areas and targeted activities. Historically, Edina, it's been housing and redevelopment, and been successful in doing that. Helped facilitate many different projects, 50th and France development in the 1970s, Edinburgh, Centennial Lakes, the Grandview area. More recently now, Southdale, as Bill mentioned, in the Simon development, Pentagon Park, and many others, all the TIF districts that were mentioned in the previous presentation. Focus again on renewal efforts and housing development, and primarily housing for low and moderate income households within the community, providing opportunities for them to seek that housing at a lower cost. And the HRA administers the city's tax increment financing districts, or uses those tools to help facilitate those efforts. Nothing changes in TIF relative to whether it's used by an EDA or whether it's used by an HRA. You still need to make the same findings. It still needs to be the projects that would qualify for that specific tool. But an EDA can use TIF identically to how an HRA uses TIF. I think the main change with an EDA is some of the other powers that we'll talk on here. City Council serves as the HRA Board of Commissioners, so it is an independent body. We have separate meetings, regular meetings, available to the public. The HRA appoints an executive director, holds those regular public meetings, approves the financing and the transparency related to those funds. So that is how it operates currently under the HRA Board. And then I mentioned the historical activities. The HRA has citywide taxing authority, is able to adopt an HRA levy that applies to the entirety of the city of Edina, and that provides a funding source that can be used in furtherance of the HRA's efforts in housing and redevelopment activities. It is subject to the local budgeting process and needs to be transparent under the truth in taxation process that applies to all taxing jurisdictions across the state. And requires annual city council approval. However, where those funds can be used are a little bit more limited than citywide. So for housing efforts, that money, and broadly speaking, the HRA activity can support housing efforts across the full spectrum of the city. But if we're talking about redevelopment activities, there is actually an area of operation, it's called a project area, that has been adopted within the city. So the HRA went through a public hearing process, consulted the Planning Commission, and designated the Southeast Edina Redevelopment Project Area. This area that's in the green outline covers roughly half of the city, and targeted that specific area for where the HRA would take its redevelopment actions, right? This does not preclude the ability to expand that area in the future. There's just a public process to be able to do that. This has worked historically because that is a section of the city that is primarily dealing with these redevelopment activities. The remainder of the city, majority of it is primarily residential neighborhoods that aren't seeing that kind of development. Not to say that it might not happen in the future, but again, the HRA has established this area within which it would operate and use its funds. Generally speaking, we've already kind of talked about how you use the HRA in the previous discussion, so I'll move ahead in the interest of time, but you can carry out the various activities that are enumerated in statute and have done so. Now getting on to an EDA. What is an EDA? Well, essentially it's a similar format, another structure that can be used by Minnesota cities. Just came a little bit later in the evolution for what the legislature granted cities to be able to do. I think there was, I wasn't a part of those discussions back in the 1980s, but, HRA Act preceded this, established the ability for cities to use an HRA inherent in the city before this, and I think they came to realize that maybe those powers were a little bit too limiting for some of the things that cities wanted to do, particularly when it comes to the items that Bill mentioned, business development, business retention, job growth, economic expansion, and those activities. And so the legislature gave the ability now to create this new entity, the EDA, if a city wanted to. It needs to go through a process to do so, but it could establish that. Additionally, it actually gave a city, if they did create an EDA, the ability to transfer all the authorities and powers and duties of the HRA to that body as well. So they could basically inherit and then continue on in those efforts. So again, legislature, it evolves. Things are not necessarily, clean. They didn't go back retroactively and say, hey, all HRAs can now do these things. They actually wanted there to be a more forthright process that a city would have to go through if it did want to create this new body. It doesn't mean that it has to be one body. It can be separate. You can have an HRA and an EDA. You can have an HRA and EDA and technically, I guess, a port authority, but I'm not aware of anybody that does that. But again, the focus is creating this body that could potentially expand its efforts into more business development activities. That does provide the ability to use that general funding source for a little bit more broad flexibility on loan programs and land acquisition or property acquisition, how you can, the objective of buying property and potentially selling it for purposes of business development instead of having to rely on the primary objective being redeveloping a site would be the difference. EDAs also can act as a limited partner involved in an entity, so that is one other difference to be aware of. Doesn't mean that you have to, but it does have that power to do so. And as I mentioned, if the city council does allow it when they establish an EDA, they are able to transfer all of the powers that are available under the HR Act to that body as well, or restrict it if they want. The process involves adopting an enabling resolution. So this has a public hearing component, but essentially the city council approves an enabling resolution that designates what specific powers they want to grant and how the EDA would operate within the community. Establishes the governance, sets the various limits that the city wants to impose on that body. So just because it's in the statute doesn't mean that you want to necessarily use it in alignment with your policy objectives. So it allows the city to put some guardrails in place and maybe not a all or nothing approach. And in that enabling resolution, as I mentioned, can transfer control and authority of any HRA projects over to the EDA if it's desired. The EDA Act does require that you set governance. It could be a board of commissioners, could be designated as a 3, 5, or 7-member body subject to the city council's approval. It could be exactly the same as what you do right now, where the board of commissioners is 5 city council members, or you could appoint other individuals to supplement that body. A minimum, at least, of 1 in a 3-member body needs to be a member of the city council, or a minimum of 2 if you're using a 5 or 7 member body. But that's subject to the city that's establishing the EDA to set those governance procedures. And then the EDA, once it's formulated, they adopt a set of bylaws, policies, and all the things that you are familiar with as an HRA, the things that you do as well. There's selection of officers, an annual report, all of those types of things. Same budgeting process and the like. We've kind of touched on this broadly speaking, but the common EDA activities that would be available beyond the HRA's scope, again, focus on tax-based expansion and job creation activities within the community for business development and retention. They're able to, fund and administer studies, buy property, provide financial assistance, negotiate with developers in order to achieve those objectives that are beyond just housing, beyond just redevelopment, but more broadly speaking, to support business expansion within the community. It does have to do so within a targeted area, just like in HRA. So as I mentioned, that project area, the Southeast Edina redevelopment project area, the EDA would have to establish a similar type of project area for where it wanted to target these activities within the community. It could be specific neighborhoods, it could be an individual property, it could be the entirety of the city. It's up to the city and the EDA's discretion on how to proceed and what works best for that community. But then I think to what Bill wants to actually talk about is the ability to really jumpstart and create some new business assistance programs that, examples being like, certain cities have been able to either buy existing property or even fund and build new development that can serve as a business incubator and actually lease out that space to try to grow and enhance small businesses so that they can have a place to grow their business and then potentially leave and buy a larger piece of property or expand their business elsewhere within the community. There's some other forms of technical assistance programs that are administered using EDA funds to help for business expansion, growth, retention, and things like that. As well as facilitating marketing efforts to market the city of Edina more broadly to try to attract new business investment, business engagement, and actually go out nationwide or internationally to try to convince investment within the city of Edina for the purposes of these goals. Primarily, EDAs are funded either through city transfers of general fund dollars, or they do have the same ability as an HRA to levy funds specifically for the EDA's needs. It has to go through that same process, truth and taxation, approval by the city council within its budgeting process every year, and the amount of that levy is capped based on a percentage calculation on the size of the tax base that you all represent. That is very similar actually to the HRA. It's just I don't know why it's a different percentage, but it's still that 0.0185 for an HRA instead of 0.01813 for an EDA. They also can be separate, right? So there are actually some communities, if they do have an HRA and an EDA, they can levy both of those things. They segregate the dollars. The dollars can only be spent on, the EDA levy can only be spent on EDA activities. The HRA levy can only be spent on HRA activities, but they're not, they're not combined together under that limitation. They can be separate levies. And there is actually a process to increase the EDA levy beyond that percentage threshold if so desired. I don't think that's something that the city of Edina is necessarily interested in, but there is a process, if you did have a need to go through a public hearing and petition process in order to increase that percentage if it was ever necessary. One thing I would note, I don't think we're trying to move very quickly here in the city if you did want to pursue this, but you do have to let the county know by July 1st if you actually are going to impose a new EDA levy. And so any kind of formation would have to happen before that date if you wanted to actually have it be in effect for 2027. That doesn't mean that that's something that you want to do. I just want to point that out. It does require, there is a little bit of a lag. And obviously there would be a very deliberative process here in the city of Edina if we were going to do this. And then the last point there, the EDA can administer TIF districts. It can inherit the HRA's TIF districts. There is no change in the type of TIF districts that you would be able to pursue. In EDA, even though it's not specifically assigned housing and redevelopment, an EDA can establish a housing TIF district as long as it meets the requirements within the statute for a housing TIF district. And as I mentioned, because the EDA can serve and be granted the powers of an HRA by the city. Some examples. So, Edina has used an HRA only. It's worked very well for you. Similarly, in the cities of Plymouth, Lakeville, Hopkins, these are just other examples for you to be aware of. There are cases where there are HRAs that may have been established and then they transition to an EDA at some point within their history, and they've transferred all of the authority of the HRA to the new EDA. That would be the case for St. Louis Park, Brooklyn Park, Minnetonka, Burnsville. They do administer under that type of authority. And then there are others that have multiple, right? So they have an EDA board. It could be the same as the HRA board, or it could be two separate. The membership could be the same of the boards, not the same board, but two different boards with the same members, or they could be two different boards with separate members. So the example primarily I would look at would be Bloomington. So they did get special legislation to establish a port authority within the city of Bloomington. They operate under that. And then they have a completely separate board, completely separate people appointed by the city to serve as an HRA to focus primarily on housing efforts within the community. And sometimes those bodies, they work together as well. Woodbury has EDA and HRA. I think it's the same council members that serve on the bodies of those entities as well. Richfield also has an EDA and HRA separate membership. In addition to that, some communities also have advisory commissions that serve beneath that. It's the same way that you use a planning commission. Some communities have housing commissions or a specific economic development commission where they will appoint members from the city that might have some acumen or some interest in pursuing specifically economic development activities, and then they rely and consult with those advisory bodies on a limited basis. Usually those advisory bodies don't have any decision-making authority, but they can provide recommendations and do some of the background work to help the governing body in formulating the goals and objectives of the community and how they want to pursue development. So I think I fit this in before the 9 o'clock hour, but I'm happy to address any questions you might have. Again, we're just planting a seed and making you aware of the different tools that are available, and look forward to furthering discussion with you throughout the year.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Anhut. Let me ask if any of my fellow commissioners have questions for Mr. Anhut or comments. Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you very much. That was helpful to break that out. Just a brief question. What does Eden Prairie have?
Oh, boy. I think it's just, I'm sure they probably, it's an HRA. What I don't know is if that HRA has somehow adopted the guidelines of an EDA, but they kept the name the HRA. So that's one thing I just want to clarify.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Newendorf, come back up. What is it about this potential model you find intriguing in terms of the work you've been doing for us under the EDA model?
Sure.
Or under the HRA model? Sure.
So I think the HRA has been highly successful in redevelopment and pretty successful in housing. Housing is really difficult. One thing we learned during the pandemic years was that strong business communities, strong local economies sometimes need a push from the city. And if you're a business that wants to invest, not redevelop, not tear your building down and build a new one, but just reinvest in that building, that's where we ran out of options, ran out of tools. And so prior to the pandemic, I was never involved in conversations about that. After the pandemic, I heard from so many businesses that needed some kind of help, and not necessarily a handout. It could be a loan, could be just better promotion of the community. So those are the kind of things where, I can do a little bit of promotion, I can do a little bit of attraction, just some staff time, but I really can't spend or put real dollars to make a difference. And so that's a tool that I think would be helpful to have a stronger local economy. And right now that tool is not really available to us. So that's what intrigues me about the EDA.
Commissioner Jackson and Commissioner Risser.
So one of the discussions in the community is about the use of TIF, and your previous presentations showed how we look at big jumps. There are people who are like, why do we need a big jump? If we had the ability to help existing businesses and everything, would we see, do you anticipate that that would slow down the transformative nature of development in our city and have it more protection and enhancement of existing businesses as opposed to the transformational change? How would an EDA and the powers of the EDA affect that mix?
Sure. I still think there'd be a balance. If we created an EDA, I don't think we'd want to stop redevelopment. Just looking at inflationary costs, looking at community expectations, the expenses incurred by the city and HRA are going to continue to increase. The only way to keep taxes reasonable for the whole group is to have a stronger tax base. So I still think we do need some big transformational improvements. Plus, frankly, I mean, there's some properties where they were great in 1970. It's 2026. They are not top of the pile anymore. But I think there needs to be a balance. I look at the business industrial park west of Highway 100, north of 494, near where the city's new public works facility is. That's an area where I don't know if it needs transformational change. I don't think the market is ready for transformational change there. But some businesses have a hard time doing business because they have some basic fundamental needs. That area is pretty old. And so that's a region where I think some additional economic development activities could be helpful, but not. I see it as a way to supplement the work of the HRA, not to replace the work of the HRA.
Commissioner Risser.
Thank you, and thank you for the information. My concern is the timing on this because, we are moving toward redoing our comprehensive plan, and it seems, as I just think about this, there'd be a logic in waiting until after that has been complete. We're also working on zoning, and I look at the way projects have moved forward, and I did catch a little bit of the Planning Commission meeting last night. We have moved forward with projects, and I'm thinking about that industrial area near the fire station. We have one business that was allowed to move forward as a warehouse and a retail, the Drooling Moose. It got, I'm not really sure how that was approved, but it really made me think that whole area needs to be looked at very carefully, and we need to figure out what is the direction it needs to go in terms of what is allowable use. And I could see a model of warehouse/retail being permitted throughout that space, so it's not just one entity that has that ability. And that was sort of driven home by the Salvation Army discussion. But a larger point is sometimes we permit an entity to do something, and then we don't go back and make sure that we have zoning that is more broad spread. And we did that with Americana and with the parking variance, and we haven't, to my knowledge, I don't know if we're rewriting that ordinance, but I think we need to clean things up in terms of our zoning before we start moving forward with more revenue generating things. I do want to say I really like the idea of focusing, shifting gears here, on new multifamily affordable housing policy, and that would be, for me, what I would think would be the most pressing thing in terms of the anticipated policy discussions. So thank you.
Commissioner Pierce.
If I
go ahead.
Could respond just briefly. I agree that there is a correlation, a connection to the comprehensive plan. We always want to be careful. Zoning discussions, those kinds of things should stay in the realm of the city council. Neither an EDA or an HRA has zoning powers, but they're definitely connected. The reason that I wanted to start this conversation in 2026 is that it usually takes 2 to 3 years to actually implement a new entity like this. There's no urgency. We don't have to do it tomorrow. So it takes time. We want to do it the right way. But if we want to implement the next comprehensive plan, we need to have this kind of governance conversation beginning this year. So they're definitely connected. Thanks for bringing that up.
Commissioner Pierce.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I think my questions and comments are just more from a practical perspective. There's definitely overlap between HRA and EDA. I can't fathom why we would have two bodies that have the exact same makeup either. Some of the cities have the city council on both HRA and EDA. That I'm sure it makes sense for them, but from a practical standpoint, I'm not quite sure I understand that. And so in those two comments, I think it would be smart for us to have that deeper conversation on what's the scope of EDA and HRA, right? And then the second one, I think I am intrigued by having an EDA that I think would allow us to have more business leaders be a part of it. And so that's kind of a question, I guess, not to be answered today. But I guess the one question would be, not for today, understanding how people are added to the EDA, right? So I think understand those two things. What's the scope that we want to focus on? How are people other than city council members appointed, interviewed, what have you? Because I would be intrigued to have a separate body that could focus on that more narrow scope and allow us to have a couple of local business leaders to add that additional expertise to making some of those decisions. So as we go forward, those would be two of the things I suggest we kind of look at. No response required today.
Executive Director Neal.
Just I have a response, but it's brief.
Please, thank you.
When I worked in Northfield in the mid to late 90s, they had they had a city council, of course, and they had a separate HRA and a separate EDA, all populated by different people. I would not recommend that structure. What I saw happen there was, and I think they would affirm this, is that those individual entities, the EDA and the HRA, began to have their own values, their own strategies, and they would often be in conflict with the council because they viewed themselves as being an equal but separate kind of organization. So that was complicated. Eden Prairie's system, when I worked there, was very much like ours, right? The council served as the HRA. They toggled between meetings very quickly there, didn't have separate meetings like we do here. But that was more akin to what Edina does.
I think, Manager Neuendorf, you've got our curiosity up a bit, understanding that this is just touching on the idea of what this might look like. So to the points that have been raised here, I think especially by Commissioner Pierce, how these organizations are populated, like the EDA model with HRA Powers in Minnetonka and Burnsville, how are they populated? I know I've had conversations with mayors in Bloomington over the years about the Bloomington Port Authority. I think that's maybe a combination of elected and non-elected people. Understanding more about it would be important, and going to the next step of giving us some further education would be valuable too, I think. So I think, are we all comfortable starting that process of evaluation? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And Manager Neal, you had one other item on here. Understanding that it's 9:09.
Yeah, We can.
There's no discussion.
Yeah, we don't have to have any discussion on that. We can just bring that to the next HRA
Okay.
meeting. But I did have one item in addition to that.
Sure,
and that
go ahead.
is a staffing item. For the past 7 years, Liz Olson has been the staff support for the HRA. She has moved on as of yesterday, right? Yesterday was her last day. So we are planning to fill that position, and we'll keep you updated as we make progress doing that.
Right. Very good. Anybody have comments? Okay, just quickly, I would say that, and Councilmember Pierce sent me an email yesterday, I think, about ICE activity and some of the groups that were meeting around area, I think including faith community people. And I just wanted to advise people that we had a meeting of 8 mayors here last Friday noon, and yesterday we had a meeting of 15 mayors, city managers, and police chiefs in Eden Prairie on this interrelationship between local governments and ICE-related activity. I just came away with kind of vexed by the idea of what we can do when you think about constitutionality-related issues, when you think about their policy-related issues. I don't know where to start from a local government standpoint yet about how to start to address some of these concerns that we have. And so to the extent that any of you, and we're getting correspondence from our residents about, well, what are you going to do? And we released that statement in December about how we interact with ICE. I think we probably need to do that again and maybe tighten it up a little bit, but I think people want to know what we're doing. And no one knows that we've been in some of these meetings, for example, and trying to figure out a pathway here. So I can't tell you I've had any epiphany about where to go next, but to the extent any of you have ideas, I'd love to hear them. The only thing I've come away with so far is getting a bunch of mayors to not send an article to the Star Tribune, but let's send a letter to the President of the United States and see if we can implore him on a higher level. You know, if we can tamp down, one of the concerns of mayors is that the rhetoric is getting pretty amped up. The governor goes to 3, and as Mayor Bussey says, and then the president goes to 8. You know, it's really tough. So I think mayors are thinking about trying to lower the temperature, take the high road. We put a letter together that I'm going to circulate again to these 15 mayors today to see if we can send it to the president, to see if we can get anywhere with him on them ICE making sure that they're doing their work in a constitutional manner, and that we can get them to modify their policies relative to what their activities are from ICE around schools, around religious houses of worship, and around medical facilities. Would be really helpful, I think. But we'll see where all of it goes, and so let me know if you got ideas. And member, Councilman or Commissioner Mercer.
The only thought I had was to expand it and also include our senators and representatives.
Yeah, and we had yesterday
national...
we had a representative from Kelly Morrison's office there.
Okay.
She circulated a form that residents can use, and she just sent an email while we were in this meeting, and I forwarded it on to Manager Neal and Jennifer Benarott. There's a form that if you want to engage the congressional office, there has to be a form filled out that allows them to interact with Department of Homeland Security. So I think if we can get that up on the website some way, somehow, and along with maybe part of that message that came from her staff, that will be helpful. So to your point, Member Mercer. Okay. I think that's it. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
We got a motion by Commissioner Jackson, second by Commissioner Pierce to adjourn the meeting of the HRA this, what day is it? 15th day of January, halfway through the longest month of what seems like the longest month of the year, at 9:13 a.m. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adjournment of the HRA say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried? HRA stands adjourned.